This episode contains discussions of graphic violence, murder, and themes relating to sex work, which some viewers may find distressing. Viewer discretion is advised. Camden in London. It has a storied history, one of transformation and reinvention. In the 19th century, it was an industrial hub, with the Regent's Canal serving as a lifeline for transporting goods. Factories and warehouses dominated the landscape, their brick facades looming over narrow streets. But by the late 20th century, Camden has shed its industrial past to become one of London's most vibrant cultural quarters. By the early 2000s, Camden had cemented its reputation as a mecca for music lovers, artists and free spirits. The cobbled paths of Camden Market drew millions, a place where punks, goths and indie kids mingled with tourists, all seeking a piece of London's edgy, counterculture heartbeat. The area's pubs and bars thrived, hosting live gigs showcasing rising stars and established legends. From the Electric Ballroom to the Orley Arms, the streets of Camden reverberated with sounds of indie, rock, punk and electronica. The music scene weren't just a backdrop but a lifeline for many who found refuge in Camden's chaos. It was a place where outsiders become insiders, where the unconventional was celebrated, but beneath the colourful exterior lay a darker reality. As vibrant as Camden was, it also carried a shadowy side. The borough was no stranger to crime, addiction and poverty. The same streets that buzzed with life during the day became an haven for darker activities after sundown. Drug use was rampant, and petty crime often spilt into more violent territory. For those on society's margins, Camden could be as unforgiving as it was alluring. In the early 2000s, the darker side of Camden was emblematic of a broader struggle across London. The city's rapid growth and gentrification created stark contrast between wealth and deprivation, hope and despair. Camden became a microcosm of these tensions, a borough teetering between its vibrant cultural identity and the struggles faced by its most vulnerable residents. It was in this complex and often contradictory setting that Anthony Hardy lived, a man who on the outside blended into Camden's patchwork of eccentricity, but beneath his unremarkable exterior lurked a darkness that would forever mark Camden's history. Sally White was born in a quiet suburb of London. The youngest of three siblings, her childhood was unremarkable but filled with love. Her parents worked hard to provide stability. Her father was a mechanic and her mother a part-time nurse. Sally's friends would later recall her as warm, curious and eager to make people laugh. In school, Sally was bright but easily distracted. She thrived in creative subjects like art and drama, but struggled with the structure of academic life. After finishing her education, she had various jobs from waitressing to retail, often moving between roles as she searched for her place in the world. By her late 20s, Sally's life had taken a more uncertain turn. Struggles with addiction and relationships had left her vulnerable, and she drifted to Camden in search of a fresh start. In Camden, she found solace in its chaotic energy. She rented a small bedsit off a side street and spent her days weaving through the market stalls and her evenings in pubs like the World's End. She'd become a familiar face to locals, striking up friendships with other regulars, many of whom shared her struggles, but also a defiant hope. It was around this time that Anthony Hardy's life intersected with Sally's. Hardy had once been a family man with a respectable engineering career. Married with kids, he appeared to have a steady life. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Mental health issues and alcohol dependency began to erode his stability. After his marriage fell apart, Hardy moved into council housing in Camden, retreating further into isolation. Neighbours described him as polite but withdrawn, a man who largely kept to himself. However, there were unsettling signs of his unravelling. Hardy was known to the police due to a minor disturbance and had been sectioned under the Mental Health Act after a troubling incident. Despite this, he was often released back into the community, his struggles inadequately addressed. Sally White's disappearance was quiet at first, unnoticed by many. Her body was discovered in Hardy's flat in 2002, sparking a wave of shock and horror. Initial press reports described her as a transient figure, a victim of her circumstances, but the truth was more complex. The police initially treated her death as suspicious but not necessarily part of a larger pattern. Hardy claims she died of natural causes, and the lack of immediate evidence seems to support his assertion. It was only later, as more details emerged, that the full extent of his crimes would come to light. For Sally, a woman who had sought connection and purpose in Camden's chaos, her story ended in tragedy. But it was only the beginning of the investigation that would unravel Anthony Hardy's horrific double life. Bridget was born in New Zealand and raised in a small, tight-knit town. Her childhood was spent surrounded by the vast open landscapes of her homeland, where she often explored with her siblings. Known for her adventurous spirit and infectious laugh, she was drawn to the world beyond, seeking excitement and opportunities overseas. In her early 20s, Bridget moved to London, eager to immerse herself in the vibrant city life. Initially working as a receptionist, she found Camden's eccentricity appealing. Bridget became a regular in Camden's pubs, her Kiwi accent making her instantly recognisable. Though she seemed to enjoy the lively atmosphere, friends later noted she carried some quiet sadness, a longing for the familiarity of home. Elizabeth, or Liz as her friends called her, had roots in Eastern Europe but was raised in London. Her upbringing was challenging, her family struggled financially and Elizabeth had to grow up quickly. Despite the hardships, she was fiercely independent, known for her sharp wit and determination to make her own way. Liz worked a string of jobs from barmaid to shop assistant but found stability elusive. By her 30s, she'd faced a share of challenges, including difficult relationships and bouts of homelessness. Camden offered a sense of belonging, a place where she could lose herself in the vibrant nightlife while still finding camaraderie among others navigating similar struggles. By the time Bridget and Elizabeth crossed paths with Hardy, his spiral into darkness had deepened. Once a seemingly ordinary man, Hardy had been a loving father and a dedicated worker in his engineering career, but a strain of mental illness, coupled with alcoholism, led to his downfall. His marriage ended in acrimony and he retreated further into isolation. Mental health professionals had intervened on multiple occasions, but Hardy's release back into the community left gaps in his care. His fixation on violent imagery and dark fantasies grew unchecked, a twisted outlet for his escalating mental instability. Bridget and Elizabeth, like Sally before them, become part of Hardy's sinister world. Bridget was last seen leaving a Camden pub, her warm personality making her easy to approach. Liz, similarly, vanished after a night out. Both women, vulnerable in their circumstances, fell into the orbit of a man whose facade of harmlessness masked a horror of violent intent. Their disappearances initially went unnoticed by many, a tragic testament to the transient lives often led by those on society's margins. When the remains was discovered, dismembered and discarded, Camden was plunged into a state of shock and fear. As the police pieced together the connections between the victims and Hardy, his facade began to crumble. Neighbours recalled odd noises from his flat and his habit of scavenging in the bins. Behaviours that had once seemed eccentric but now took on a sinister significance. Bridget and Elizabeth's lives, though tragically cut short, become a pivotal point in exposing the full extent of Hardy's depravity. Their stories intertwined with his, painting a harrowing picture of vulnerability exploited and trust betrayed. On the 5th of January 2002, Anthony Hardy was arrested at a homeless shelter in central London. His capture came after an intense 48-hour manhunt, during which Hardy had disappeared from Camden. Blending into the shadows of the city's underbelly, the police had been tipped off by a sharp-eyed worker at a shelter who recognised Hardy from the news. The shelter worker recounted the moment they spotted Hardy, nervously describing the interaction. He was quiet and didn't cause a scene, but I knew it was him. His face was all over the papers. Charged with the murders of Sally White, Elizabeth Fallad and Bridget McLennan, Hardy faced a courtroom packed with press, families of the victims and an uneasy public. The trial held at the Old Bailey was one of the most chilling in recent memory, as the prosecution detailed the horrific extent of Hardy's crimes. Key witnesses included forensic experts, detectives and neighbours. The evidence against Hardy was overwhelming. DNA from the victims was found on his clothing and in his flat. CCTV footage placed him at the scenes of the crimes, and his internet history reveals searches that paint a disturbing portrait of premeditation. The defence claimed that Hardy's long history of mental illness, including a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, impaired his judgment, but the prosecution countered that Hardy had been fully aware of his actions, pointing to the calculated way he dismembered and disposed of his victims. The prosecutor stated this was not the result of impulse or madness, but a methodical and deliberate series of murders. The families of the victims sat through a harrowing testimony, holding on one another for support. Sally White's sister spoke outside the court, her voice trembling with grief but filled with determination. She said, "We want justice for Sally and for the other women whose lives he took. They weren't just victims, they were daughters, sisters, friends." After weeks of grim evidence and emotional testimonies, the jury delivered their verdict. Hardy was found guilty of all charges. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, describing him as a dangerous, manipulative predator who posed significant threat to society. The trial's conclusion brought a semblance of closure to the families and to the community, but the scars of Hardy's crimes would linger for years. Camden, a borough known for its vibrancy and resilience, struggled to reconcile its identity with the darkness that had briefly taken root in its art. The case also sparked a national conversation about mental health care and the criminal justice system's failure to prevent repeat offenders from harming others. Changes were promised, but for many, they come too late. This is not the story of a killer or the lives he took. It is a tragic, horrific tale of failure, a failure of systems, of oversight and of care. Anthony Hardy's descent into darkness was not sudden, nor was it invisible. His unravelling was observed, documented, and in many ways ignored. The discovery of Sally White's body should have been a turning point, a glaring red flag that demanded action. The state of Hardy's flat alone spoke volumes of the chaos and danger lurking within, yet for reasons that remain indefensible, the warnings was missed and the evidence dismissed. One life is too many to lose, and Hardy's victims deserve better from the institutions meant to protect them. The police, the welfare system and the healthcare services all failed in their duty to safeguard the vulnerable. And what of the women and girls whose names we don't know? The ones Hardy intimidated, manipulated and tormented but who never come forward. Their stories are just as crucial, yet they remain untold, lost to a system that failed to act. Hardy was a monster, but he was a monster allowed to grow, a reflection of a broken system that turned a blind eye to those deemed unworthy of attention. His crimes are not just a stain on Camden's history, they are a despicable reminder of the cost of inaction, of neglect, of failing to see the humanity in the most vulnerable. As we reflect on his story, we must remember that behind every headline is a human being, a life full of hopes, struggles and dreams. Sally White, Bridget McLennan and Elizabeth Fallard's lives were stolen, but their memories endure as a stark call to action. For Camden, for London and for all of us, this is a story we cannot afford to forget. Thank you so much for watching this episode of London's Dark Archives. For my new viewers and subscribers, welcome. If you've enjoyed this story, please do hit the like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe. It might seem like a small thing, but it makes a massive difference. It helps more people discover these stories, and it's a little bit of repayment for me for the effort that goes into making them. Next time, we'll be stepping into a completely different chapter of London's criminal history. Join me as we explore the audacious tale of the great train robbers of South London in the 1960s. A gang of thieves, a crime that captivated a nation, and a story filled with twists and turns you won't want to miss. I'll see you then.